So, Borderlands. That came and went, didn't it? Borderlands, of course, is the newest film from director Eli Roth and has been quite a journey to get to this point so far. I mean, when you look back at the history of the movie, it was announced back in, I think, 2011, and it's been through many different directors and different iterations until it finally landed on Eli Roth and has now arrived in theaters here in 2024. And it's safe to say that the film has been put through the ringer. There has been a plethora of negativity and bad reviews that have been sent towards the film's way, and after seeing the movie, rightfully so. Now granted, what I want to do in this video is not a review per se, because there's so many reviews out there already on YouTube, and the movie has suffered enough hate in that regard as it is. And also, I'm not the biggest fan of reviews personally. Like, I think they certainly have their place on YouTube, and certain people are very, very good at doing them. I personally don't feel like I am very good at them. I prefer to look at things in a slightly different way. So what I want to do in this video is not review the movie necessarily, but talk about why the movie failed as a video game adaptation for Borderlands. I mean, just to give you my very, very brief thoughts on the movie, it's not great. I mean, I didn't hate it necessarily. I don't think it was worthy of the 0% Rotten Tomato score it had at the very beginning. I don't think it's, one of the worst movies ever made necessarily. But it's certainly not good. It's a very, very messy film. It's got some really dodgy CGI in portions. I think the script is really weak and kind of cringy in a lot of ways. And also the editing is really choppy and all over the place. It ruins what could be some cool action sequences that are in there, but they are completely ruined by some really choppy editing. But it's not a complete loss. Like, I do think there are some good elements in the movie, like the world building and the set design is all really good. There's some really interesting worlds in there. I think performance-wise, I think everyone does a good job. I think Cate Blanchett obviously is always here to deliver. I also really enjoyed Kevin Hart in like more of a serious kind of role. Like, I didn't expect Kevin Hart to go dead serious with it, but he does, which is quite refreshing. And I'm always here for Jamie Lee Curtis and Jack Black, to be honest. I quite enjoyed Jack Black as Claptrap. Thought he was a good addition. But with that out of the way, let's dive into what I really want to talk about, which is why the Borderlands movies fails as an adaptation of the video game series. First thing I really want to talk about is the fact that this movie is live action. And I feel like that when doing a Borderlands adaptation, my first thought wouldn't be a live action movie. My first thought would be, let's do this animated. Because when you look at the Borderlands franchise, it has this gorgeous animation style that is not necessarily realistic in any way. Of course, it's based on some elements of realism, but realistically, it is an animated game. And with that in mind, I think doing the movie in live action kind of does a disservice to the brand, because it's part of its brand identity. Like, when I think of Borderlands, I think about that animation style. I don't think about a live action version. Like, that to me just doesn't even equivalate. So the fact that their first initial thought was to do a live action movie does make sense for Hollywood, but for me personally, like as someone who has played the games, I'm not even like the biggest lover of the games or anything, but I have played them. As someone who's played them, my first thought would be, let's do an animated project, or even more than that. You could even go further and do, if you wanted to make it original, do an anime project on Borderlands. That to me would have been better, because I think watching the film in live action, it just lacks that creativity and that flair. It lacks that punch that the games have, because the games have such a unique look to them that really no other game has really tried to replicate, because they just know they'll get told that they're copying Borderlands. So the fact that the movie didn't try to replicate that in any way, I do think is a big disservice. I think another huge problem with the movie, and I sort of knew this going into it, is that the movie was not R-rated, or not 15 here in the UK. That's crazy. Like, how are you going to do a Borderlands adaptation and not make it R-rated? When you look at the games, they're so violent and bloody and full of so much bad language and stuff like that. All the stuff that makes up a big R-rated movie. And I'm shocked that the movie didn't go in that direction, because why make it family friendly? Like, that just doesn't align again with the Borderlands brand at all. And it's not like, I could see them from the perspective of this being a few years ago, where they went, oh well, if we make a movie that's exclusively R-rated, it's not going to do as well. But we've seen that if you make a movie good enough and people love it, they will come out to see it, and R-rated movies will do well. We've seen it with Deadpool and Wolverine this year. We've seen it with Joker. We've seen it with all the Deadpool movies. Like, if you make a good enough movie that people want to go and see, you're going to make that money no matter what the rating is. So the fact that it wasn't R-rated and they made it almost a family-friendly affair, very, very strange decision. I mean, I know that this movie has been compared in a lot of ways to Guardians of the Galaxy, and perhaps that's what they were going after. But even then, I feel like Guardians of the Galaxy, while being a, PG-13 movie, still in a way goes a lot further than Borderlands ever does, and that's a problem. And the third and final problem for me that really makes this fail as a video game adaptation is, where are the guns? Where are the guns? When you think about Borderlands and just gameplay wise of Borderlands, it is all about the guns. Not only is it obviously a first person shooter, but the guns are a part of the game's identity. It's all about the grind of using a gun that you find, using it to its max, and then getting another one, and then another one, and then another, until the very, very end of the game. That is the gameplay loop of Borderlands, is getting a new gun, and then another new gun, and then another new gun. There is no focus on guns in this at all. Yes, characters use guns, and there are shootouts in the movie, but the guns aren't particularly imaginative. They're not particularly wild or any way. They aren't, focused on in any way. It's not like anybody, looks at a gun and really goes into the details of it and goes into wild, detail about how it works. There's none of that. It's just people use guns, as in any other action movie. And again, as a Borderlands adaptation, that is a huge missed opportunity, because the guns are what make Borderlands. These crazy, huge weapons that really help to, they're all so different from one another, and each gun has its own personality in a way. This has none of that. Characters just pick up guns that they have, some of them might already have them, and they just use them in shootouts with no detail, no discussion, there's no deeper look into the weapons. They're just kind of there. And again, that's really, really disappointing as a Borderlands adaptation, because it's just lacking a huge part of what makes the games so special and so beloved and so unique as well. Overall, as an adaptation of the Borderlands video games, I just feel like this movie fails on so many levels. Again, it's getting bashed by the reviews for being just a bad movie, but it goes deeper than that with Borderlands, because it also has to be a good video game adaptation. And I spoke about in my last video about the Last of Us TV show and how that was a really good adaptation. This is everything that the Last of Us isn't. There's no links to the games whatsoever. Yes, there are character names that are the same, and there are some things that look similar and plot lines that look similar and play out in similar ways, but it's just lacking all of the identity of the Borderlands games, to which it makes you sit back and think, well, why did we even do this? Why are we here? Why not just make this a kind of sci-fi romp rather than doing a Borderlands adaptation? You're just using it for the name. And Borderlands, to be fair, isn't the name nowadays that it used to be about 10 years ago when the movie was announced. So they took so long to make this movie that it's kind of become irrelevant. The last Borderlands game we got, official mainline entry, was back in 2019. And even then, that game didn't sell as well as a lot of the previous games did. So I feel like they've really missed the boat with this. I feel like it has come out 10 years too late. And in those 10 years, we have seen all the tropes that are in this movie. And again, it could have been interesting and one for the fans if they had just made it a strong adaptation of the games. But they couldn't even deliver on that. But what did you guys think of the Borderlands movie? Make sure to let me know your thoughts on it in the comment section down below. Again, I didn't hate the movie. I didn't hate watching it. I wasn't bored or anything. But I certainly wouldn't watch it again. I don't think it was great, and as an adaptation, it failed on many, many levels. But let me know what you thought in the comment section down below. Are you a fan of Borderlands? Let me know. And if you want to see more videos like this from films and TV shows and everything else in between, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any uploads from me. And I hope to see you guys again next time.